How's everybody doing? You guys still awake? It's a beautiful night tonight, I think, and I'm so happy to see everyone here. It's really I have a very warm feeling in my heart right now, and because of that, I want to tell you a little bit about my village. My name is Dawn WELESKI, and I'm the co-director and co-founder of Conflict Kitchen, which is located in this village over here, you see, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And it started in a neighborhood in Pittsburgh called East Liberty, and I'm going to tell you a bit about that neighborhood and a project that actually started before that. So this is an empty storefront in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is a post-industrial city. We have a lot of steel workers and miners. My family came from that background. I'm 100% Polish. We're very proud of our Eastern European heritage. And so Pittsburgh in general is not very diverse, right? But what you're finding in Pittsburgh economically now is that there are these empty storefronts that need to be filled up. And so we kind of saw this as an opportunity, myself and my collaborator. And so we created several projects here. In the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a project, a small cafe, which we started with some students. And in the cafe, we're serving breakfast. We have bacon and eggs and coffee and tea. And, just regular fare, but we're only open from 11 p.m. till 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. And then Saturday and Sunday mornings for brunch. So super strange hours, not a very good business model. But you'll find that when you walk in, you'll sit down and you'll have your eggs and bacon, and then the waitress will come over and say, "Oh, yes, I was actually wondering if you would like to be on our talk show." So while you're waiting for your food, you get to be on this live streaming talk show that we co-produce with our customers. And this is an interesting term that's going to come up, I think, a bit, this co-creation of culture and collaborating with participants that aren't necessarily only an audience. So over the 4.5 years that we were open, people got together on stage that typically wouldn't get together, right? Strangers in the street, people on the bus that you don't necessarily talk to. I heard there's not a lot of small talk that goes on in public space in Hong Kong. So we tried to create that and to frame that and sort of have this ongoing documentary of the area. And again, 10,000 people by the end of the waffle shop. And so John and I, working on this project, saw it as an opportunity to use food as a seduction to get people to come into a project that we were doing. And so we saw everyone that walked in, one, as a financial supporter, because the project was pretty much self-sustaining financially. Also, they were participants, potentially, of the talk show, and they were audience members, immediate audience members. And they couldn't go anywhere because they had ordered bacon and eggs, and they were waiting for it to come out. So, so it's kind of, we got people stuck there. And so basically what we did is we decided, let's use food again. And so right next to the waffle shop on the right-hand side, we thought, well, let's start another restaurant, another horrible business model, another restaurant right next to yours. It's going to compete. They're going to compete. And so you would actually look inside that little window. It was a takeout restaurant, and you would see people making the waffles, but you would also see them making other food. And John and I were trying to decide what kind of food we should have. And we were thinking about what Pittsburgh didn't have culinarily. How could we diversify the landscape for Pittsburgh? Right? I mean, there are definitely no Afghan or Persian restaurants, and people didn't even know the difference between the two, or Venezuelan or Cuban restaurants. And we realized we were naming cuisines from countries with which the US government is in conflict, and that's how Conflict Kitchen was born. And so basically we have our first iteration here, Kubada Kitchen, where we served Iranian food, and then all the food comes wrapped in a takeout wrapper upon which are printed interviews that we've done with people from that country and those that have immigrated to the US. And then people are basically, as they're eating the culture and the food, they're reading about the culture and the politics. And then on those wrappers, there are discursive viewpoints. So for example, this is part of our Afghan wrapper. And it says, US presence, this is a particular topic that people wanted to talk about. One person says, I think that after 9/11, the destiny of the US and Afghanistan became linked with each other, and that it was a good thing for the US to go in and overthrow the Taliban from power, giving women and children more freedom. But then in the next breath, the next person said, and this is all verbatim, these are quotes from people living in Afghanistan, that the US presence is an occupation force, and it was a big mistake costing thousands of lives. Right? So what it means not only for my political views as an American and someone else's political views as an American, they're not going to be the same. And they're also not black and white. And that's the same thing for our cultural views. The person sitting next to you, say you're from the same country or the same city, what it means for you to be from Hong Kong and someone else from Hong Kong are two totally different things. And so we try to help engage in conversation about that at the takeout window, right? So we actually train our staff to be sort of professional conversationalists and to admit their own ignorances, right? So it's not about teaching. It's about creating a space for people to open their minds and to also, again, admit ignorances, say that the opinions that they have are inherited, and to come to a space where they're a bit uncomfortable, where they're challenged to create their own opinion, right? And then we do that around food. Now, we go out of business about every 6 months, and then we open a new iteration. Sometimes people at first, when we were doing it, didn't know that we were a different, or they thought we were a different restaurant, didn't know it was run by the same people. They said, oh, where's that Iranian food? We really liked it. Oh no, try the Afghan food. Okay, okay. So then we served up some Afghan food. Again, as you see, all the design changes, the wrapper changes, and then La Cocina Arepa, serving Venezuelan food. And then at that point, we were able to, after doing this for about 1.5 years, travel to the country and do interviews with people in real time. And not only that, cooking, right? Food is at the center of this. Now, food is on the front, sort of the medium, right? We're shopping with people, we're cooking with people, but really the medium of this work are relationships between people, right? And we do that by interviewing. We do that, through food. Obviously, you see here, we're sitting across from someone at a table. And then just the general experiences we have while traveling. They sort of stimulate new ideas. You have to be open to that. So, we're walking down the street in Havana, we had this wonderful dinner with this hip hop artist that you just saw, and he's talking about racism in Cuba and how it exists and how all the Cubans with light skin don't think that it exists. And we come across this door, and it says it's the North Korean embassy. I mean, as an American, when else am I going to get to go to the North Korean embassy? So of course, the first thing I do is I go up and I ring the doorbell. Right? And this guy comes out and he starts to talk to us. He's one of the, basically a person that's a part of the consulate, and he's, in flip-flops and shorts, and we start to talk to him. We take this as an opportunity, right? You don't know when those opportunities are going to strike, when you can begin to be a good listener to people and to be empathetic to their situation. So we asked, what's the difference between North Korean and South Korean food? And he was, interested to talk about it. So, beginning with food, of course, this is what they're presenting on the outside. So you see food. Everyone loves to talk about food. So it's pretty great. So anyway, so we go back. We're thinking about doing a North Korean iteration. We put up Cocina Cubana, our Cuban iteration. And then we also do public programming and events. So there are multiple invitations for the public to get into the project, right? You might, see one of the facades up and you're walking down the street and maybe there's someone, and this definitely happens, is they see Arabic lettering on the sign perhaps, or Farsi. And they just, they're not too happy that there perhaps are people from a particular country that's maybe Muslim or that speaks Arabic in their city. And then they don't approach Conflict Kitchen, they never come. But that's okay, right? Because the idea is that now they know that there are immigrant populations there, and they were faced with that, with the pattern, with the aesthetics, design, very important, right? And, but maybe they smell the food, so they want to come to it. And then they come to Conflict Kitchen often, and they say, oh, I want to have greater depth of conversation. So we put on events like this. This is a live Skype meal, an intercontinental dinner party, basically, between a gallery in Tehran, which you see on the screen there, connected live via Skype to an elongated table in Pittsburgh. So basically, it was this symbol, this metaphor for us across continents connecting, where we just did that through the electronic medium. And then people just had a regular dinner party after we got settled in and the technology wasn't, as wonky. And we served the same food on both sides of the table, with the Iranians eating their food. And it was kind of funny because our friend in Iran, Sorab, he hates vegetables, and he doesn't cook. So we cooked all of the Iranian food fresh, all of the Americans, and then he got takeout. So it was, kind of counterproductive, counterintuitive on that side. But, and then we also were working with young Afghan filmmakers under the age of 25. I'm just going to give you a quick overview. Persian Cultural Festival, first ever in Pittsburgh. And that's when we knew that we were really getting to something good, is that when we had the Persian community come to us and say, we don't have access to the average Pittsburgher, right? And you have them coming to you for Persian food and not us. So it's interesting. They won't come to our events. So it became sort of a nexus of, we're a bridge. We're a nexus for this performative activity that makes people feel a bit uncomfortable, but then also engenders a sense of curiosity at the same time. So we like to sort of toe that line. And then we also have this public storytelling billboard on our roof in our old location. That's a project that my collaborator John Rubin did with an architect. And we basically put, quotes up there that we had on in the wrapper that maybe people weren't coming, but they could see on this repurposed billboard, right? And so facts and opinions, what one's perception and what the reality is totally intermeshed and confused. And so we were able to move to a new location, to basically a public square in Pittsburgh. And it kind of looks like this, and all of a sudden we had so many more people coming. We're open 7 days a week for lunch and for dinner, and we have maybe some days 400 people coming. And so, it's like, and I'm an artist, if I didn't mention that. And again, the relationship is the medium. And for an artist to get 400 people to come see their painting in one day, that's not gonna happen, right? Now, no one knows that this is artwork. This guy doesn't know that he's reading a piece of artwork, and this guy doesn't, and this guy doesn't, but it doesn't matter, right? And we saw people reading these publications, and we saw ourselves as sort of a publishing house, a self-publishing house. These are small books that we did where these were interviews with Palestinian kids. Our new book out right now that we're handing out for a small fee, because again, we're a self-sustaining business, so we gotta keep that going. Our budget's about $750,000 a year, and almost all of that is from the food revenue, right? People voting with their dollars. And the new book out are interviews that Iranian grandparents did with their grandkids and vice versa. Pretty neat. And then still we're artists, right? So we're gonna do some strange things to really challenge people. So we do something called the Foreigner at Conflict Kitchen. And we say, hey, with your Iranian food, would you like to eat with Sorab? He's an Iranian and he's around the corner. But you're gonna have to do that through Elise Walton, one of our staff members. So you're super confused at this point, you walk over and you see this white chick with dreads, clearly a Pittsburgher, and this isn't Sorab. Anyway, but Elise has a set of headphones on, and then you get mic'd up as the customer, and you ask Sorab questions, and Sorab actually live in Tehran is hearing exactly the question that you're asking. Then he answers the question, Elise hears it in her headphones, and she repeats verbatim as he's saying it, which is more difficult than that sounds, basically exactly what his answer to that question is. And then you hear it. So there's this layering of gender, of religion, of race, of nationality, political opinions. Elise had to give opinions of Sorab's that she didn't agree with herself. And so again, it's that sometimes that one person removed as well that creates a scenario for people to ask questions they wouldn't typically ask if someone was right in front of them. And then we've been invited to do projects in different cities. This is in Porto Alegre, Brazil, where the great thing that you could do on the weekend where everyone went was this pond where you could do these swan boat rides. So we said, this is the perfect place to have a political intervention, right? Why not? So we were doing research for a Venezuelan iteration and decided that we would get a Barack Obama lookalike on the right and a Hugo Chavez lookalike on the left to take people around in swan boats. And so you could get a ticket, and it said on the ticket for free, if you want to go for free, ride along with one of these guys. And so you get in with Barack, and you're just like, he's a handsome guy, and you're just a little nervous. It's a very romantic ride. And he says, well, what do you think of me? And just like, I don't know who you're. No, I'm Barack Obama. What do you think of me? And then Chavez does the same, and you know how Chavez might act. And then all of those opinions from the Brazilians are called into speeches. Again, which discursive viewpoints are presented at once, and then they present them owning the opinions of the constituents on these floating platforms in the middle of the lake. And it gets pretty dramatic, as you can imagine, as Chavez does, so in his style. And again, as a publishing house and using people's opinions in a performative nature, we did something called the Iranian speech, where we asked Iranians what they would like Barack Obama to say if he were to give a speech about Iran. So we printed that and then also had the impersonator in front of us at the square giving that speech to the public. And then we found an even better impersonator, and he did the Cuban speech with Cuban opinions. And then just very quickly, we work with lots of different school groups. We now have an education and outreach arm. We have a dedicated director to that. We work with people from other countries that we're not focusing on to have these things called lunch hours where we get together and try to get people from the immigrant community in Pittsburgh. And those we're collaborating within those countries together to speak with Pittsburghers. We do large meals also. So this is a 250-person meal with North Korean and South Korean food being served at the same time. So you would walk in and you wouldn't know if you were sitting down to a North Korean meal or a South Korean meal, and you didn't get to choose. But once you did, you would realize that under the meal, there were placemats. Under the South Korean meal, there were placemats upon which were printed interviews that we had done with South Koreans and their opinions about North Koreans defecting and immigrating into South Korea. And then on the North Korean placemats, interviews with North Koreans about their defection stories into South Korea and everything that happens in between. We were able to travel to South Korea and actually work with defectors and to cook with them again and have conversations with them. And the most interesting part was that the arts organization that was facilitating this for us, all of them South Koreans, had never met a North Korean, or they didn't know that they had. So there was this moment where the people that were invisible to them, that they walked past every day, that don't typically even speak because the difference in the language is so noticeable that they're shunned in the South Korean community, they were able to connect with these people. So this was our North Korean iteration. And if anyone knows Korean in here, there's a mistake on there, so don't look at that. But as with any ethnic restaurant that's in a different country, there's always like some sort of mistranslation on the menu, so it kind of worked out. And then we also, when I was in South Korea working with the defectors, we did something called the North Korean cooking lesson, where all the windows at the bottom that were different countries in Skype, and then they were connected to the North Korean chef that's in the pink hat and sunglasses there with me in South Korea. And she basically taught a very simple North Korean dish to everyone live, real time, across the world, and we all cooked it with her. So pretty neat. And then something that we find with Conflict Kitchen is there are constantly people being hospitable to us and inviting. And not because we're Conflict Kitchen, but because, we want to go eat with folks. So, we're in Palestine. There's a lot of tea that's being served, baklava. We're trying out some desserts and pickled vegetables. And then, we're coming across stuff like this. So this is one of my favorite T-shirts. So, and how many people, I'm actually interested in this in Hong Kong. So how many people know where Israel is? Just humor me, raise your hand. How many people know where Israel is, right? Okay, how many people know where Palestine is? Okay, how many people discuss that conflict between Israel and Palestine on a monthly basis, say? Okay, fair enough, fair enough. As an American, I'm affected by it much more because of my government's policies and what, our national identity, so on and so forth, and economics very much, mostly. So that's something that we, very much, that slide shows it right there, it's very clear. But I think one of the things to remember is that, through working with food, you begin to realize that conflicts that are happening a world away from you are actually, you can relate to them very well because food is the thing that humanizes us. It's, breaking bread at a table. You begin to find commonalities among the conflicts that you're exhibiting within your own personal life and then with people that are across the world from you. It's actually, everyone's very similar, right? And so we're learning all of the different techniques and, we go to the soap factory in the Toucan soap factory, and they're laying out all the, looking at all the different products they create, and it's just a bunch of liquid soap, and then, they're lining it with chalk and stamping it by hand and cutting it and then packaging it. And so seeing the way that not only food is produced, but other products, and we also sometimes import those and then wrap stories around those and sell them at Conflict Kitchen. And then as you're walking through any city, of course, you're going to see basically these issues where the politics do come into the food, right? So you're walking through here, for example, and this was a real conflation of space for us and of place and of home. So my two collaborators were walking through this field and across this in a Palestinian village, and there was a wall, and you could see Israeli settlements ahead. And there were a lot of these gas canisters, and they picked up one. You could hardly walk without stepping on one. And they read on it Bridgeville, Pennsylvania, which is a city about 20 minutes right outside of Pittsburgh. Right, so this, we were very much a part of the conflict and what was being produced and a part of our economy in Pittsburgh. So we opened our Palestinian iteration, everything's going great, it's our most popular. This woman here is yelling at Robert, our chef, to tell him to make the maftool slightly differently, it's great. Working with the Palestinian community, and then this guy tweets that basically we're anti-Semitic and we're anti-Israel because we're not presenting an Israeli opinion beside a Palestinian opinion. And so eventually, you know, the way that Conflict Kitchen lives for most people in the world is through the media. And the people that are reading the media are a tertiary audience, and we are very conscious of that. So, you know, John Kerry's wife funds radical anti-US, anti-Israel eatery. We had gotten a small grant from the Heinz Foundation. Teresa Heinz is John Kerry's wife. And you know, here the Heinz Foundation actually ends up disavowing their grant. And they say that that basically because we did programming on Palestine, that it appears to be terribly at odds with the mission of promoting understanding, right? So if you want to talk about Palestine, you're not promoting understanding. Eventually we get a death threat, and then we close for 3 days, and then we realize actually that the Pittsburgh public is very supportive of us. They come out all the days that we're closed, about 300 people in front, and talking about why Conflict Kitchen was important to them. And then also just along the facade, letters of support. So to thank them, we have a potluck where we didn't cook the food, but the Pittsburgh public had to cook the Palestinian food for 250 people. And then, you know, and this happens just a year later. This just happened. A Muslim taxi driver was shot, basically in what is pretty much has been termed as a hate crime within Pittsburgh. And so, you know, we're trying to reach out to other communities in Pittsburgh, and there are other resources. You know, we're trying to bridge those gaps. And so the Islamic Center in Pittsburgh had us come in, we worked with them, and we did, and is basically a Muslim solidarity potluck, where people who, again, within the Muslim community, even in Pittsburgh, a city of only 300,000, are from many different countries. So they each cooked a different dish from their country, and we sat down and we ate together. Very simple, but very powerful in a lot of ways. And I think that's one thing to remember is that, you know, when we opened, we thought we were going to be open for maybe 3 weeks. We didn't think the Pittsburgh public would be interested, and we certainly didn't think that folks would nationally or internationally would think that we were of any importance and sort of put Pittsburgh on the map. But you know, it all started with this empty space. And it doesn't have to be a storefront. It can be this empty seat next to you on the bus. It can be your bedroom, which doesn't cost money. You know, bring a couple of strangers in and have a discussion. But it's about finding that space and looking at your context and really investigating it. And instead of placing your ideas to create the form and the content of that, just recognizing that you can collaborate. You can collaborate to co-create culture with people and strangers that you've never met before. Thank you very much.